Hey everyone, Tim here from SnapAttack. Let's dig into this week's Threat Snapshot. So today we're going to be talking about why you need security content for your SIEM and EDR. And if you're one of my technical followers, you may want to just skip ahead because I'm going to go on a little rant here. So SIEMs, EDRs, these are two security tools that every organization should have in their SOC. Let's talk a little bit about them. So SIEMs first. We've got this article on dark reading. It's really sponsored content that is thinly veiled as actual, newsworthiness, but the headline still tracks. And this is saying that most enterprise SIEMs are blind to MITRE attack techniques. In fact, they fail to detect a whopping 76% of attacker TTPs. I think a lot of that is probably common knowledge at this point. Most SIEMs that you buy, and again, this is a pretty significant investment for a lot of organizations, especially for large ones, you spend millions of dollars on this tool and, I have to pump data in it. I have to pump security content. It feels a lot like you went to an auto manufacturer, you bought a car, whether that's a, old ICE vehicle or whether it's an EV, and wait, I got to put gasoline or I got to put electricity in this thing for it to run. Yes, you do. So a lot of these SIEMs, again, you feed your data in, but you also have to make sure that you have security content for it. And it's not shocking that a lot of organizations are failing to cover as much of that MITRE attack matrix and a lot of those TTPs as you can, because that takes significant time for creating those, for tuning those, for validating those. And that's really where SnapAttack can help accelerate. So I'll let you read this if you want to learn a little bit more about this from the SIEM standpoint, but again, these sort of things need a lot of effort to really be effective in your organization. The other piece we're going to talk about is EDRs. So I know we've covered these quite a bit. I know in some of the more recent examples, we've talked about, even nation state adversaries that are, able to evade EDRs by some of the most basic and trivial things. I know they are advanced and persistent threats, but a lot of times that's just making organizations feel a little bit better that they got hacked by such basic things. So why are EDRs interesting here? And again, when they came on the market, as a red teamer, these things were definitely stopping a lot of your behaviors. We had to think a little bit more carefully about our OPSEC. We had to not just get around antivirus and a very trivial signature, but it was actually looking at what we're doing. And there's been a lot of research into EDR evasion. One of these here, so this is a little bit older. This was presented last year at DEF CON's Adversary Village. It still tracks, and this is going to be a theme that I think we're going to be talking about in some of these upcoming snapshots is, how do I protect myself when I am across from a hostile actor who is trying to evade my detections and evade my EDR? What sort of detections are still resilient to those sort of attacks? And this is some interesting research around using Python of all things to evade your EDR. If you really want to understand a little bit more about how EDRs work, some of the blind spots and things, this article does cover some of those in depth, as well as the bypass strategy. Ultimately, if you just want to come and use the code, so this is called Pyramid is the tool. It is open source. It's available on GitHub. And what it is doing is using a Python C2 agent to kind of package and load into memory various tools like Bloodhound, secretsdump, LaZagne, and it's really allowing you to run those, common tools as part of your operation, but in a way that it's hopefully going to evade EDRs. And, we're 9 months away from this article, another 2 or 3 months from, DEF CON, so this will be out for over a year. And spoiler alert, we have a lot of these, top EDRs in our lab. We test these sort of things against EDRs to see what do they detect, where do we have to fill in the gaps. And these sort of behaviors, they still fall through the cracks. So the good news is that, again, with the right security content, you can arm your SIEMs, you can arm your EDRs to detect and stop these sort of threats. So let's pivot over to SnapAttack. Let's talk about two of these. So we ran Pyramid in our lab. We've got two of the common techniques that we've seen here. One of them is secretsdump. I feel like we've probably covered that on some of our threat snapshots before. Again, the goal of that is to extract secrets from a Windows victim machine. That can be cached credentials. That can be password hashes. That can be other things. So it's a built-in, it's a tool. It's built into Metasploit. A lot of times you'll see people use secretsdump there. It's pretty easy to use. So We've got the Windows victim. We've got the server here. You can actually see, this being run here in Python. And again, if we were on a actual operation, this would be in a hidden window. You wouldn't actually be, looking at the agent and seeing all of that being run. But this is going to, again, launch all of those, tools, utilities. You can see here that this is loading, the requirements into memory. It's got InPacket and, all of those other dependencies. And it's, dumping the credentials. It's doing all of those things and communicating back to our C2 with the results. So very effective. There are, again, lots of detection opportunities for this, which we'll discuss in a minute. You can see some of the recommended detections that we have for this threat. And similarly here, we've got another capture using Bloodhound. I know we've done a whole threat snapshot in Bloodhound, so if you want to see more about that tool specifically, feel free to take a look. But again, we're here on our Windows victim. We're going to, open up Python, and we're going to, launch, the agent here for Pyramid, and we're going to be able to run Bloodhound. You're going to see it, extracting, pulling all of those things into memory and executing it. And a lot of the TTPs that you're going to see, that we're traditionally looking at, EDR logs and process creation events and things, those start to fall apart. And that's not uncommon. And one of the things we talk about a lot, in our threat snapshots and SnapAttack is this notion of robustness, where an attacker has multiple ways that they can execute these behaviors, and you need detections that are robust to handle those different variants. And obviously the best detections are going to win out in those scenarios. And it hopefully also means that the more robust your detections are, means that you don't have to have 50 detections for Bloodhound deployed. You can have 5 or 6 really good ones that are looking at, the very most common TTPs that it's going to have to use to succeed. And again, we've got some here that it's definitely going to be very, very much useful here. So let's talk about, how would I, use security content for my SIEM, for my EDR that is going to help, especially if I've got an attacker who's trying to evade those defenses. So looking at Pyramid specifically, again, we can look at the tool itself and not necessarily what it is doing underneath the hood. So I don't care if it's running Bloodhound or secretsdump or anything. You can still write, signatures and tools, for these sort of tools. So a couple of things with Pyramid. One that, we noted is it's using the Cryptodome library for all of its, C2 communications. That's going to be extracted and run in a very obvious way here. You can see a couple of those instances here for our Bloodhound or secretsdump threats. So this is something about that library and that tool that could be very easy to detect. You can also have some more evergreen behavioral things like, again, Python initiating a network connection. This is a Sigma community rule. Depending on your environment, this is something that could be pretty high confidence. If you don't have a lot of software developers that are working in Python, and again, you could probably tune and whitelist your detections around those sort of behaviors. You can see a little bit here, doing some tuning for, localhost. We can look for Python that is doing weird things. And you can see here, a threat in our threat library of using InPacket here to, launch psexec with pass the ticket. And, this is, again, interesting because Python normally shouldn't be making these network connections. And that also goes back to, why Python and why a lot of these interpreters can be chosen for EDR evasion is because, again, it's an interpreted language. So I can do literally anything with that. I can be doing something, very, helpful and positive. I can be injecting Bloodhound into memory and launching that to enumerate your domain. I can be dumping your secrets. Again, these EDRs and tools have a hard time sometimes with those intent, but ultimately here, the behaviors underneath are what we're going to be looking at. And, where this is true is a lot of these behavioral detections that we have are going to hold up still extremely well. This one, again, is still from the Sigma community detection, and it's looking for secretsdump, but, that remote activity. So this is looking at, a Windows event log 5145. You can see it connecting to, the admin share. You can see the temp, files here. We can see a couple of hits here. So we can see secretsdump is being triggered here. Again, this is effective. It is something that, again, if you didn't have the MITRE attack coverage for in your SIEM, like we were talking about earlier, that even if this tool evaded your EDR, as long as you have those behavioral detections in your SIEM, you're going to be covered. And this is especially important because a lot of times EDRs are not going to be relying on Windows event logs. They're not going to be relying on, syslog and other, application logs on Windows. That's a behavior that you're going to have to, be looking at creating your own security content for, and, oftentimes using in your SIEM to be looking for those behaviors. So this is especially important to detect these sort of things. And again, it doesn't really matter if I used secretsdump here, built in, if I was using it through Unpacket, if I'm using it through Pyramid, this detection would trigger in a way that we're able to, see that sort of behavior. So this is especially useful there. Bloodhound ones, again, we've talked about some of these before. So there are ways that you can launch Bloodhound with Python. There is a Bloodhound, .py, and this is part of why Pyramid is using it. Again, we can still see these behaviors, or python.exe is, writing a bunch of those file names that we have. So this is a good detection that you can use. We can also see a little bit more evergreen ones around Bloodhound. So, looking at it enumerating, domain accounts. So we can see some other examples in our threat library. Again, there's literally tons. So DC sync and, Unpacket secretsdump here. Lots of these commands are using this. So again, if you have these sort of behaviors logged to your SIEM that you're able to monitor and alert on, doesn't really matter if you're looking at Pyramid or some other evasive technology that's trying to work around the threat. At the end of the day, it's the behavior that's going to have to be executed by these tools, and those become extremely hard to mask. I think one more here that we have, again, suspicious domain share folder activity. This is something that we had, last year put together with Bloodhound. Also works for, other sort of techniques that are, working in a similar vein. You can see here lateral movement with PSExec. You can see DC sync and some of those others that have hit here. Again, another Windows event log, 5145, looking for some of those specific target names. And again, this is still highly effective. And, these are those sort of behaviors that will help you stay ahead of the threats. So short, again, this is why you need security content for your SIEMs, for your EDRs. A lot of common EDRs that we've seen here and we've tested, Pyramid against, they weren't detecting Pyramid. They weren't even always detecting the underlying tool behaviors. And, security content like this is what's going to help keep you ahead of the threat. So that's our snapshot for this week. It's a weekly series. Like, subscribe, comment below the video, and we'll see you next time.